What's up, guys? What of course you'll be seeing today is a breakdown and review of the pulse rifle in Destiny called Oversoul Edict. Though it's not a guaranteed drop, though it does drop pretty frequently, you can acquire this weapon by clearing the Abyss in the Crota's End raid on hard mode. It's the only way to get this weapon. To break down the stats, of course, to start, when breaking down this pulse rifle, it starts with a 300 base damage and increases to a maximum of 331 when you're done with the upgrades. You're going to need Glimmer weapon parts and Radiant energy to upgrade it, though the other form, be it Relic Iron or Spirit Bloom, may differ for your particular weapon. With the stats, it has a fire rate of 77, which is quite high. It has an impact rating of only 4%, a range of 33%, a stability rating of 55, a reload percent of 61, which is pretty good, and a magazine size of 30. Of course, just for simplicity's sake, if you didn't know, pulse rifles fire in 3-round bursts, so bear this in mind as I break this weapon down further. In terms of PvP damage output, it hits for 14 per bullet on non-critical shots and 21 per bullet on headshots. With regard to the skill tree, there's no variation for raid weapons, which of course means that every single one will be the same. Every single Oversoul Edict deals arc damage of note, so it'll be quite useful in Nightfall situations where arc burn is buffed. And you have 3 clear options in terms of sight, and they're actually basically the same. They're all red dots, but they all have slight variations. The OES version helps in close quarter engagements. The OAS version profiles enhanced target acquisition. And the ORES version enhances handling, range, and recoil control. I prefer the one I just mentioned, the ORES, but of course the choice is yours. When you break down the skill tree, the most important perk to note is full auto, which allows, of course, you to fire the weapon in full auto mode. It becomes, instead of a pulse rifle, it's an auto rifle. Because just about all of these weapons in Destiny that have this perk comes with a little bit of a bug that sometimes will stall out as you're firing. Bear this in mind when you're in situations of close quarter engagements or parts where you can die quickly in raids, because if you're taking on a boomer and you're using the full auto perk and it all of a sudden stalls out, that extra second or two's worth of a stall could get you killed, so bear that in mind. The next 3 perks which you have a choice over are Snapshot, which increases your aiming speed, Field Scout, which increases the magazine size from 30 to 42 and is actually my personal preference, and lastly, Fitted Stock, which increases weapon stability. This weapon's already quite stable on its own. I don't feel you need to use that perk. The single most important 2 perks on this weapon, though, are Darkbreaker and Hive Disruptor. Darkbreaker allows you the ability to shoot through the Hive Knight's wall of darkness. They don't fight back when they have their shield up, so having a perk that allows you to cut right through the Knight's shield allows you to take them out pretty quickly without them even fighting back, so it helps. When you combine this perk with Hive Disruptor, which deals increased damage to Hive Majors, and I think it procs every few bullets. There's a cooldown to it, so not every single round buffs. Don't quote me on that specifically, though. I'll have to further research that because no one seems to know. You'll encounter a ton more of these Knights and Hive Majors in the Dark Below DLC, especially in hard mode. So these 2 perks in synergy actually help you out an awful lot. They're a good combination together. The other 5 remaining perks are damage upgrades. Now, in PvE, this weapon will come in handy significantly for any arc buffed Nightfalls. And more importantly, like I just said, it'll help in Crota's End raid because of the Hive Disruptor and Darkbreaker perks. The strengths are those perks, the fast fire rate, high stability, and with Field Scout, a very large 42-round magazine. Those will help to keep an accurate hand alive when dealing out increased damage to Hive Majors. So those are the pluses. The massive downside to this weapon is the fact that, well, it's a pulse rifle, and just about all pulse rifles in Destiny have this low damage, high rate of fire combination with no variability in between. If this weapon had a higher damage model, or like a higher damage per burst, and a lower fire rate, I think it would be more effective. But because you have to continually put out this very high rate of fire and make every shot count, it's a big downside to using pulse rifles in Destiny alone, especially this one here, because the impact is so low. And bearing that in mind, logic dictates that outside of this raid, the weapon, or outside of the Dark Below raid or Arc Buff Nightfalls, this weapon's actually very average, maybe even below average. like a good steady hand and skill player can make it work. Absolutely, no denying that. But if you have Vision of Confluence, Fatebringer, or anything else from the last DLC, which actually has less damage output than this, I'd stick with those personally. So again, yeah, the Arc and Hive buffs make the weapon. Otherwise, it's not a weapon you're probably going to want to use all the time in PvE. It's even worse for PvP. This is a weapon, like I said, similar to a buff for PvE. Because you won't be encountering buffs for Arc or Hive enemies unless the Crucible starts putting people as Hive enemies. Much of what makes this weapon is useless there. The low damage and high fire rate model is not a model I'd recommend for the Crucible to begin with, because when you're matched up against high damage model weapons that are going to stagger you and decrease your health, or you're up against a Suros or something else like that, you're in trouble. But like just the sheer logic of it, with the amount of perks designated to help improve the gun in raid encounters, you're outclassed by weapons that don't have specific perks dedicated to the raid. So it's an issue there. So I wouldn't recommend it for the Crucible, to be perfectly honest with you. It's not a weapon that I'd choose first. So overall, to sum up, as much as I've done a very harsh job critiquing it, it's a very specific niche weapon designed for Crota's End and Arc buff Nightfalls. You're probably going to have quite a bit of success there. And even in Crota's End, unfortunately as it is to say, you can probably have success or better success with other weapons. Like the Vanguard dealer sells another nail in the coffin. If you have Firefly on that, you're going to blow through every thrall that comes near you. So it's a very niche weapon, and unfortunately it can be outperformed by non-niche weapons that you get in it. You can find success. I'm going to underline that aspect of it, because especially against anything Hive related. But if you have other options, fully maxed weapons options otherwise, like if you have Cyril's Regime, Red Death in Crota's End, another nail in the coffin, Vision of Confluence, Fatebringer, I'd probably use those instead. But it can be fun to use, and it has its niche effectiveness. Just keep it away from PvP is basically all I'd say. Have a good one.